Hello, welcome to another episode of Virginia Wine and Song. It's been a couple of years since I've posted a video, and I'm trying to revive this YouTube channel. So I'm here to talk about Virginia wine and a Virginia winery, and I'll have a series of these videos hopefully coming in the next couple of months or years even, I don't know. So we were going to get back and celebrate Virginia wine, and we're going to pair Virginia wine with a classic and what I think are overlooked albums by artists from the classic era of rock and pop. And I consider the classic era of rock and pop, and a lot of people may disagree with me, but I consider it to be 1964 to 1999. After 1999, I think there was a real change in how people enjoy music, and also how the music itself, I think, has changed. Not for the better. That's just my opinion. There are a couple of new artists that emerged since the early 2000s that are okay, but I prefer the classic era. As I get older, I think I prefer the classic era more, and I will continue, because as far as I'm concerned, this music from that era has aged just as good as a good bottle of wine has. So we're going to talk about a great Virginia wine or winery, and we're also going to talk about a good to great album from that era. That I just mentioned, 64 to 1999. So in the previous videos, I started with the music and then transitioned to the wine. This time I'm going to start with the wine and transition to the music, because there is a tie-in between the wine and winery and the album that I'm going to feature or spotlight. So we're going to talk about a winery that is in Central Virginia. It's near the middle of the state, near Lake Anna. In Orange County. Orange County is west of Fredericksburg, kind of southwest of Culpeper, a little northeast of Charlottesville, that area. So it's a good day drive from Northern Virginia. You probably want to get a room at an Airbnb or a motel or something if you're going to go down to that area. It's probably not doable in one day, but it's worth driving to. And there's one thing I want to mention about Virginia wineries. The ones that are in Loudoun County and Fairfax County, and there are a couple in Fairfax County actually, and Prince William County and Fauquier County, those are all great wineries. They have a tendency to be a little bit on the pricier side because they're closer to DC, so their real estate probably is a lot more, so they charge a little more for the wine, and they're usually a lot more crowded. I mean, there's some wineries that you wouldn't be able to get in to get a tasting or get a table even on any given Saturday of the year, even in the middle of the wintertime. It's kind of hard to get into a lot of those wineries. If you drive a little further out into other counties, like the areas around Front Royal and the Shenandoah Valley, and then into Orange County, and not quite to Charlottesville, not as far as Charlottesville, but that area of Virginia, that's Madison County, Orange County, Rappahannock County, and Warren County, all those counties I'm mentioning, Culpeper County, they have some good wineries in those areas, and this particular winery is in Orange County, southern Orange County, very close to Lake Anna, and they're very popular in the summer because of their proximity to Lake Anna. And I'm talking about Chateau Maryland. I think that's how you pronounce it. Chateau Maryland Winery in southern Orange County, and they've been open for. I'm not sure how long they've been open, to be honest with you. I think they opened in the 2012 or 13, 14 era. I probably should have done a little more research on that, but I just visited them last spring, and I got this bottle of red from them. A wonderful winery, and it's a throwback. And the reason I say throwback is because a lot of the wineries, when I first started doing Virginia wineries in 2002, 2003. They were kind of best kept secrets. A lot of the word hadn't gone out yet. Social media wasn't really as big as it is now. And there was also kind of a negative attitude towards Virginia wine by a lot of wine connoisseurs. It wasn't until they started having regular festivals and they started being featured in wine magazines and also travel magazines, spotlighting Virginia as a wine destination. A lot of people visit Virginia for the historical aspects of what the state has to offer, but now we're also a wine destination, along with California, of course, and Oregon and Washington State and the Finger Lakes of New York. Even Texas is becoming a wine destination, if you can believe that. But anyway, Virginia is now a wine destination. So the popularity of Virginia wineries started really growing as social media became more prominent in our everyday lives. Facebook and Instagram and all the social media blogs that are out there, YouTube, etc. And this is on YouTube, so that's an example. But anyway, back then, 2002 to about 2012, I consider to be the classic era or the great era, undiscovered era of Virginia wineries. And back then, you could get a tasting for $5. There were some wineries that didn't even charge a tasting fee. If you bought a bottle of their wine to go, they waived the tasting fee. Those days are gone, unfortunately. Good for the wineries, because that means their wineries are doing really well financially. They can offer, they're pulling in crowds, and they can charge charge a little bit more for their wine. But back then, they were a little more modest, and a lot of the tasting rooms were in barns, and they were smaller homes, smaller cabin-like environments. Since then, a lot of those wineries, especially the ones in Northern Virginia and Loudoun County and Prince William County in particular, a lot of those wineries open new, really elaborate tasting rooms, and some of them even have restaurants embedded. One thing about Virginia wineries, especially the wineries in Northern Virginia, a lot of these wineries were founded by people with a lot of money, people who had very lucrative careers in various industries, and they decided they wanted to retire or even quit their lucrative career and start a winery. Take a look at AOL. Steve Case owns a winery called Early Mountain Vineyards. That's in Madison, I think it's Madison County, maybe Greene County, Virginia, on the way to Charlottesville. He has a winery now called Early Mountain, and that winery is extremely popular. I think he even serves food there as a restaurant. So, that just gives you an example. When you're going to have a lot of wealth, you're going to have, people trying to find other ways to spread their money around, or in some cases retire and do something else as kind of a hobby. And if the hobby is really successful, it becomes a real profitable business. Chateau Maryland is a little more modest. It's a family-owned and run winery. I think their own home is actually on the property, which is the way a lot of wineries are, especially in the rural parts of Virginia. And as you drive through the country road to get to their winery, you'll notice there's a lot of land, a lot of space to roam around. And anyway, I just can't say enough about it. This is a bottle of red. This is a red blend. And red blends are primarily made up of Cab Franc, Cab Sauv, Merlot, Petit Verdot, sometimes even Malbec, sometimes unusual reds like Norton. I'm not sure if Norton is really used in a lot of blends, but that's what red blend usually is. And a lot of people like the red blends because it takes the edge off. A lot of people don't like a straight Cab Franc because they find Cab Franc to be too sharp or too peppery. They like to have it moderated a little bit with a Merlot or with a Cab Sauv. And Cab Sauv is a varietal that you didn't really see a lot of in the early days of Virginia wine. But a lot of the vineyards in Virginia now have been able to find a way to successfully grow Cab Sauv. So you see that. And a lot of these red blends are all termed Meritage. And in order to become a Meritage wine, you have to pay an association that has rights to the term Meritage. It's almost like a clique. And a lot of the wineries don't want to pay that association fee to have that prestige attached to being a Meritage. So they just call their reds red blends, or they put an A in front of Meritage and call it a Meritage. So some of them do that as well. So this is a red blend. I'm not really sure what the blend is. It doesn't say on the bottle. And there's a fine line between a table red and a red blend. A table red is usually a little lighter in style and includes, several different varietals. They may even put a little bit of white grape in there to kind of make it a little lighter. So table reds are kind of a potpourri. A red blend is a little more upscale, a little more refined. I wouldn't want to have pizza with a red blend, but pizza with a table red is fine because, like I said, it's a little lighter. So this is a red blend, and it's called 1734 from Chateau Maryland. And you may notice that there's a cat on the logo of the bottle here. They are a very cat-oriented winery. In fact, there's signs when you go into the winery, as leading up to the tasting room in the parking lot, you'll see signs about 50 feet apart with a cat. I think it's the previous resident cat. I think they have a new resident cat now, but the previous resident cat is on these bottles, on the bottles, but also on these signs. And the cat has really witty things saying, develop your wine catitude or things like that. So if you like cats, and I think they have a dog too. It's a great pet-friendly winery. Very cozy tasting room. You can get a bottle or a glass to go. One thing I also want to mention is they do counter tastings. They still do counter tastings. And since the pandemic, a lot of the wineries in Virginia moved away from counter tastings for a lot of reasons. For cost savings, for one, they don't have to hire as many people. But also, some people actually prefer to have flights brought to them at the table, especially if they have a smaller group of people. They don't really want to engage that much at a counter with the staff. They just want to have these flights brought to them at the table. And they still have interaction because the employee or the staff member from the winery comes over with the flights and explains the flights and what wines are in the flights. And there's usually a little card that explains what each wine is and the order you probably should drink these wines, because you want to drink wines in a certain order when you do a flight or when you do a counter tasting. I prefer counter tastings because I like the interaction with the staff. Sometimes even the owner of the winery will be behind the counter. I went to a winery last weekend in Rappahannock County, and the owner was actually there, and he wasn't pouring, but he was behind the counter and he was helping out, and I was able to interact with him a little bit. You don't have that when you have a flight. And also, I think a lot of the younger people, Generation Z, and also a lot of the millennials, they prefer flights because they're usually with a group of people, and they just, they prefer to have. I'm not saying they're being antisocial. They just have their own group of friends. I have a tendency to be biased because I think Generation X and even some baby boomers are a little more social when it comes to wine, and they like to enjoy wine in a counter tasting with other people standing next to them, the way it was done back in the day. And like I said, a lot of the wineries since COVID have gravitated away from that. But there's still wineries that do the counter tastings, and Chateau Marilyn still does counter tasting. So big shout out for that. Okay, enough of the wine. I don't want to pontificate too much here, but I want to transition over to the music, because we're going to pair this wine. Notice there's a cat on the label, with this album. This is an album by Al Stewart called Year of the Cat. I'm sure you recognize the song. It's one of those epic 70s pop songs, over 5 minutes. That's why it's epic. Just like Jerry Rafferty's Baker Street. And there were a couple of songs that made the charts that were very, very long. And Year of the Cat is a song that, it pops up from time to time in movies and TV shows, and it's a classic, timeless song. This album is definitely worth a purchase. If you buy, if you go to a used record store, even if you buy your albums on eBay, check it out, because it's got the song Year of the Cat is just one example of how great the musicianship is on this record. Al Stewart is extremely entertaining. He still tours to this day. I saw him last May at the Birchmere in Alexandria, and he comes out and he tells stories. He's a historian, and he knows a lot about history, and a lot of the songs are actually based on historical events. So he comes out and talks about history, but also talks about his own history. He's been touring since the mid-'70s, so he's got a lot of stories. And this album, he had a big tour to support this album in '76 and '77, and he talks about that in his tours. And of course, his songs are great. He's backed by a husband and wife team on guitar and also keyboards, and they're wonderful, really great musicians. Definitely see Al Stewart if you have a chance, but also buy this record. There were a couple other songs on this album that got play on album-oriented radio stations back in the '70s and even the early '80s. On the Border was another mild hit. And this is the album. I got this at a used record store, and it's in good condition. It's on the Janus label, and Janus is a British company that does a lot of film restoration. They're involved heavily with the Criterion collection. and they restore a lot of classic movies. So you've probably seen their logo. If you're a movie buff, you've probably seen their logo. So it's produced by Alan Parsons. Alan Parsons produced Al Stewart's classic 70s albums, which are Year of the Cat, and also Modern Times, which is the album that came before this, and then Time Passages, which is the album that came after this. Alan Parsons, you may know him from his Alan Parsons Project, you know, his offshoot band that had a couple of hits in the late 70s and early 80s. He was a producer. He was actually an engineer for Abbey Road, and he was involved as an engineer on the Abbey Road album by the Beatles, and also on Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. So Alan Parsons was the producer behind this album. So it's got this wonderful, lush, beautiful sound to it. The music, like I said, On the Border, it's got this wonderful Spanish guitar riff in it. Lord Grenville and Sand in Your Shoes, some really whimsical songs, and the album cover has got all this cat motif on it, so it's a great pairing, like I said, with this wine. I like this album so much, or I love this album so much, I actually bought the remastered CD. The remastered CD came out about 4 years ago, and it's a little booklet in here, and it's got a bonus CD. There's a bonus CD in here composed of a live show that Al Stewart did in October 1976. There are a couple of different remasters of this album out there. There's another remaster that I have that has a radio program at the end of it where he's being interviewed on some radio station in the late 70s. So I really like Al Stewart. I was probably too young to appreciate him when the song came out on the radio. I heard it a lot on the radio when I was a kid, but I didn't really appreciate him as a talented artist until much later. So definitely check the album out, whether you buy it on vinyl. And that's one thing I will say about the younger generation, you know, the young people. I don't want to call them kids, but the young people who are in their early 20s to mid to late 30s. You know, the revival of the interest in vinyl is well known, is well documented. You got yacht rock and all that junk that, you know, that I don't really agree with the term yacht rock. I think it's fun, but I don't think it should be taken seriously. And some people would actually consider Al Stewart to be yacht rock, at least Year of the Cat. I wouldn't. But anyway, a lot of young people, if you go to a used record store in any town, and you'd be surprised how many small towns throughout Virginia and also all over the country have used record stores, and a lot of them are very, very impressive with the collections of what they have. And I've seen a couple of young people walk into used record stores and marvel over the artwork they see on the album cover, because in addition to the record itself or the album itself, you have the artwork on the album, the front cover and also the back cover and also the inner sleeve. And sometimes the albums are fold outs and they have these wonderful pictures of the musicians and everything, and great liner notes. You know, you don't get that when you download music or you listen to music on Spotify or Alexa. You don't get that whole experience that you got back in the day. And I think it's coming back. This is one of the reasons why I think vinyl has become so popular again. It's because of the artwork. And I've seen and heard young people walk into record stores and they pull out albums by artists, not only Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin and Queen and the Beatles and, you know, the Rolling Stones, not those classic albums, not just them, but they will pull out records by Procol Harum, for example, Procol Harum and Al Stewart, and I'm trying to think of some other examples, Jerry Rafferty and Steelers Wheel and Billy Joel, and I'm just looking over at my collection over there, you know, Bob Dylan. Anyway, the album cover says a lot, and the music, of course, is great. So I've talked long enough about that. So that's this month's pairing: Chateau Maryland wine in Orange County, Virginia, and the Year of the Cat. And enjoy your National Cat Month. I think every month is National Cat Month, at least in my house. So we will see you real soon.